The Front Row Back Row podcast is a show where two grad school buddies discuss physical therapy entrepreneurship. I helped guide a company to an 8-figure exit, and I'm now starting my own mobile company. Brian grew his mobile practice to 4 clinics, and he's now doing $1 million in revenue. Join us as we help you grow your own business. Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. I am the owner of Simplify Motion PT in Phoenix, Arizona. And with me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf. He is the owner of Evolution Physical Therapy in Connecticut and Long Island. And today I already screwed up their ad read, man.
Didn't even get a word out.
It's off. All right. So today, this podcast is brought to you by Physiogrowth. Physiogrowth is your pathway to a thriving PT practice. We mentor physical therapists to boost income and build successful businesses. Start your growth journey at school.com/physiogrowth-mentorship-group, or just look at the show notes because I probably screwed that up too.
No, you did good. My mom would be so proud of me that I'm the better reader now. so far. From a guy who was in remedial reading when he was a kid, this feels good.
Hey, Mama Wolf's real proud.
Exactly.
All right. So actually, Brian, you had a question that was posed to you recently that I think is going to be a great topic. So tell us what you got.
So we've got a bunch of people who have messaged us in all sorts of different forums. So we're pumped about that, whether it's the podcast service, again, whether it's a school group or jumping into our online and commenting and DMing us on social media. Please keep doing that. We love it. We love the feedback. What was cool was it was somebody who's a cash physical therapist, new to that business and doing what they're doing. And one of the things I thought was interesting in their feedback that we kind of read between the lines. So there wasn't a question per se, but one of the things that they said was they were like, I'm treating a lot of patients that I want to treat athletes, but I'm getting a lot of other patients. I'm finding that chronic pain type of population is coming to see me. And I have a bunch of those people, which I think is cool. But so we wanted to go through some of the things. So one of the things that brought up in our lessons that we've done in school is how to, market to your perfect patients, how to get more people like you want, whether it's athletes or something along those lines. And this is actually something that's near and dear to my heart because this is what I do. I treat athletes. So for me, I know the pitfalls of some of these different things. And so I wanted to go through some of the stories. We'll go through how to get a perfect patient, why it's important to be constantly marketing that person, and the pitfalls for the whole scrap it at this very interesting juncture when you're starting of screw it. I don't need that perfect patient. I'll just go to the people that pay me because that will screw you over in the long run. So I think there's a really good aspect of this. So I just wanted to kind of chat through that process.
And this is something I'm living through right now, right? I'm probably 9 months into my own practice, and it is very much, growing really well, doing really awesome, more than I even expected. And now, I'm finding that you're getting to be known as the guy who treats, for me, it's golfers, right? And people are telling you about golfers. So now I'm starting to see a few people who said, oh yeah, my friend said you treat golfers. And I think that sticking to your marketing is kind of hard because, you especially when you first start out, you're just like, I need patience, man. I need someone to pay the bills. Right. So to kind of get out of that fog, I'm interested to see what you got. I know we use a framework a lot where we talk about the perfect patient, right? Yeah. And that's something that everyone has their perfect patient in their head of oh, dude, that person I treated who was a star baseball player, or that person I treated who had Parkinson's and we were able to get them back in their home again. So, I mean, some of the new listeners to this podcast may not know about this perfect patient construct that you developed, or that you pretty much live your entire marketing by. So kind of walk me through that, Brian.
Cool. So I think that one of the things I think super important when it comes to developing your perfect patient is it's somebody who has to inspire you. The way I explain this to every single person is you have to develop them down to even if you're, and a lot of people like yourself, Owen, who have as much experience in physical therapy as we do, right? Being in this career for almost 15 years now, have that perfect patient in mind that you're when I treated Bob, I'm going to use Bob. When I treated Bob, I was all about that guy. And I told this one new grad PT who just started with us, who I was like, imagine the other 4 physical therapists have full schedules and they all got sick on the same exact day. And I said to him, and I go, I would never do this, but say I said this to him, and I was like, We're not canceling them. They're all showing up, and you got to work with every single one of them, right? And but the good news is they're all your perfect person that you want to treat. That you're like, I got it. I'm pumped. I know exactly how I'm going to do that. I go, who's that person? And so every one of us has like that thought process, and that's who you're going to market to over and over again. Now,
Yeah.
why is that important? Because like this is the whole reason why we got into physical therapy. We got into physical therapy to do stuff that we want to do, right? Like
I know, right?
number one, that's it. Like if you started your own business and now all of a sudden you're finding yourself being like, I got to do it just to get money in the door, you've just created a very expensive job that you don't like. That's what you've
Yeah,
done. You might as well go work for somebody else, honestly. Like go
sure.
find a job that you want to do, take a pay cut and go do it, right? Because that doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make sense to anybody. That's not why you're doing this, right? So in my mind, that's the first stop. So to get the perfect patient, you got to design that perfect patient down to the T. And then
Mhm.
every decision you make has to be about how how that person would react to it. And I'm going to give you a bunch of examples because it's probably going to be easier for me to tell stories quickly than anything else. I can think of
Well,
one
I
time.
just I
Go
I
ahead.
just want to jump in, by the way. I'm going to tell my own story. I've actually gone
Shoot.
into the school group that we have. I've gone into that module, your how to sell, how to
Yeah.
get that perfect patient. I've actually downloaded your worksheet and I used it to create a class that I'm starting.
Nice.
So like I it's our and it's helping. So just as a aside, like what he's going to tell you is something that like I've actually used and it's
That's
worked.
awesome. That's a great testimonial right there. That was not a plug
I
that I
know,
was
right?
expecting, but that's good. That's good.
Well, the
And I mean,
worksheet's great.
yeah, and the thing is, like, I would encourage everybody to do that. I did this, and then what I found was easier was then to find patients that I truly loved, and then I just filled it out based off of the information I knew about them, right? Because now I've treated them, so I know them.
So, I guess I have a question for you. Like, what designs the perfect patient? What's a big like? What are some of the things? I mean, we talk perfect patient all the time, but like, you got to kind of know where they are, right? Like, how to get to them, what they want. Like, what are some of those things?
Yeah, so I think when designing the perfect patient, you wanna understand all the details, like what's their name, down to like what's their job, do they have kids, what's their income, like what do they like to do, what's their primary goal, what are their fears, what do they like to do, right? What is their future? We have like an 18, I think, question breakdown of it and how it works. And the reason that's gonna be important is every decision you're gonna make is gonna be revolving around that perfect patient, right? So a great example for me is I started my practices in CrossFit gyms. That's what I started with. Well, my perfect patient loved that. They were all about that because they were a CrossFit person. So that worked. So naturally, being in that environment weeded out the people that like if they didn't like that, it's very easy to be like, oh, they don't like that. Maybe I'll go treat them at their house. Maybe I'll go treat them here. Maybe I'll go treat them at this other place. Maybe I'll change what I'm doing with my environment. Well, that's a problem because you're not catering to your perfect patient, right? So it's like
Mhm.
your compass is due north with your perfect patient. That's what's so effective about it, right? Number one. Number two, we've talked about BNI on here and networking groups and things along those lines. It's very easy. I remember specifically one feedback that I got because a bunch of people, because I at the time I was cash based, but then I also took Medicare. So naturally, by taking Medicare, I was getting a lot of older folks and referrals from there. So I remember one person within the BNI group, and I never really spoke about it. They were like, "Oh, I just thought you treated old people. I thought like that was what you did." And I was like, "Oh crap, I got to change my marketing message." So the thing is,
Mhm.
based off of the makeup of what you're doing, if your message is getting lost just based off of what you're actually doing on a regular basis, you're going to get pigeonholed into that. So you're
Mhm.
constantly trying to market towards your perfect patient because that's why we did this in the first place to treat those types of people. And two
Yeah.
is imagine a perfect patient like a dartboard. The bullseye is your perfect patient. It doesn't mean that you're going to hit a bullseye 1000% of the time. You're going to hit in around the area.
Mhm.
I'm literally staring at an email right now on my other screen that came from somebody regarding their mother-in-law. So like I still to this day, even though I market myself with professional sports and blah blah and all the stuff I do with athletes, still get questions about older folks. So trust me, if you're like, I don't want this is the one I hate the most. It drives me kind of bonkers. People like, I really just want to treat nice people. I'm like, terrible decision, right? Like we all want to treat nice people. It's like the dartboard just became gigantic. Like you're gonna get lost in the sauce. Like you
Yeah.
want to niche yourself because that's ultimately what's going to lead towards that. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it's going to let more and more people want to see you in different realms, and you're going to see a diverse population. It's not going to matter. But
Yeah.
the problem is, if you
That's
don't niche yourself, you're going to get lost, and it burns you out and stuff like that. So
That's what I think is the big thing, is that we're physical therapists. People know what physical therapists do. They know that if you're up and talking about athletes and everything, they know that you're qualified to also treat a knee replacement, right? They know that that's something that they may talk to you about. Like you said, oh, you're a physical therapist. I thought you only treated old people, and that brought you to, ooh, I gotta niche my marketing a little bit more, right?
Exactly.
So in that early stage, I was fortunate because I had some experience treating, a lot of experience treating. I knew my perfect patient when I started my business, right?
Yeah.
I knew it was a golfer. But if you're a newer grad, you may not know that yet. My first 3, 4 years, I had a perfect patient that was different all over. So, you don't want to be afraid to change that, but do realize that just spamming everybody is going to make it a really hard to finally get to that perfect patient. So changing midstream is fine, but you have to change very hard from one direction to another. You don't want to say, well, okay, now I guess I just take everybody, and then you're going to kind of be one in a crowd.
For sure.
No
For
one's
sure.
gonna. The best thing I saw is I saw something online that said, if you have a Ferrari, would you take your Ferrari to a Prius dealer? Right?
Yeah.
Or a Prius
Well
mechanic.
put.
And if you are, this was, something for baseball. They said if you have a 90 mile an hour arm, why would you go to somebody who's not used to treating 90 mile an hour arms? Right.
Exactly.
So that's the importance of niching, is that people have a lot of information now. Right.
Yeah.
And the importance of getting that perfect patient clear in your head. Um, and I mean, taking in a lot of the other factors, like, are athletes annoying, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they cancel a lot because they're all teenagers, or do I love like older people? Well, it's great, but maybe it's the same. It's a lot of the same stuff. Knowing what you can live with the best, like your example of, if everyone canceled, who would you be? If all of them were your favorite patient, would you be happy? Find that patient, because it's important for a lot of things, not just what you put up on Instagram.
For sure. And imagine Owen, like if you're trying to treat that 90 mile an hour arm and you're not
Hmm.
marketing towards that person, you start marketing towards the other group. The biggest problem is going to be if you don't market towards the person who wants the mile an hour, like the 90 mile an hour formula, but you're
Hmm.
marketing towards the older folks. I promise you, and I'll never forget this because my grandmother was a great example. I don't even know if my grandmother, if I showed her what a hockey puck was, if she knew what it would be, but she knows she lives in Tampa. She knows that her hips were done by somebody who's involved with the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's something she knows. So I promise
Hmm.
you, if you're working with athletes, you want to be niching athletes because old people will come to the guy who works with athletes. Athletes won't
Hmm.
come to the person who works with old people, right? It's that simple.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
very
true.
simple. So Owen, if you want to elevate your PT practice with growth, our mentorship helps you increase revenue and create a sustainable, thriving business. Join us at school.com/physiogrowth-mentorship-group. Damn, I screwed
Dude,
that up
you
one more
are excellent. You are excellent at reading, because that's not even how you wrote it.
time. That's great.
You
You're
got
right.
halfway. You got halfway through the first sentence, and I was like, "Oh God, oh God, oh, he saved it." All right,
Saved it at the
that'll
end.
be the
You
run.
got to stick the
That'll
landing.
be the
Even if you
running.
wobble a little, you're okay, like the Olympics.
That's
But
our
yeah,
that's
but
our
to go back
running
to it, like I think
running
I
gag
think
podcast is us reading our own advertisements and failing miserably.
our group is doing our own podcast. It's great. It's beautiful. So to go back to what you were talking about, I think that's a key piece when it comes to why it's so important to constantly market to that perfect person. Is exactly what I just said. Is if you're marketing to your perfect patient, whether it's golfers, like that golfer we talked about, will like the aging golfer will come to see you. The pro golfer will come to see you. But if you only go to the aging golfer, that pro golfer is not coming to you. And the
Yeah.
thing about having pro athletes that has always been really effective for me personally is it leads to when I did stuff with the Premier Lacrosse League and we did stuff, now we do stuff with New York City Football Club, why that made such a huge impact from a business perspective for me and my personal brand and also for Evolution is because it gave us an authority in those sports. So what happens is when I talk about lacrosse and I talk about soccer, what naturally happens? People listen. People are like, oh,
Yeah.
this guy knows what he's talking about. He's doing it at a high level, right? So in
Mhm.
these local groups, it sort of trickles down in that capacity. So
Yeah.
we've been doing that for a long time, and that's why that takes time to build. So it might not
Yeah.
necessarily work right out of the gate, but I promise you that long term it has huge impact for your growth for
Yeah.
your business.
Well, and I think it's important to note too, like obviously Brian's and treats athletes. I treat golfers who are also athletes. And but I mean, this could be anything, right? So if you are someone who deals with Parkinson's, you want to, you can look at the institutes that work with Parkinson's. If you can do stuff with like the Michael J. Fox Foundation or anything where there's this like institute that people know, that they get this kind of thing of like, well, if they trust him, I should trust him, right?
Yeah.
You talk about your grandma with her hips, right? Doesn't know a thing about hockey pucks, but she knows a bunch of millionaires trust this guy to
Yeah.
treat another millionaire who makes his money with his hips, right? So if it's not athletes that you want, but it is something on that level, chronic pain, things like that, find out what your patients are looking at as the pinnacle, as the
Yeah.
best, the one that if I could fly to that clinic, I would do it, or fly to that place, I would do it, and they would take me, I would do it. Try and associate yourself as much with that.
And think about some of the more famous clinics around the country, not just in physical therapy, but all the place, right? The Cleveland Clinic,
Mhm,
Stedman,
mhm,
HSS, like some of these big brands, like they've created these authority level type of levels of marketing that essentially pushes all these people in those directions, right? And we were just
mhm,
talking with my wife Kelly, who's got a whose practice was built around massage and that kind of stuff. And we were talking about like that took off because of massage, but like that's a different type of thing. It's not even physical therapy to a degree what's seen that way. But say
mhm,
somebody's like, I hate, like, how many physical therapists do you know? And they're like, I hate doing manual therapy. Well, guess what? Like, if
mhm.
massage clients are going to hand you money, but you hate doing manual therapy, that's a terrible thing to do. Like, from a
Yeah,
perspective, like, I don't like doing that stuff. Like, I don't mind manual therapy. I love manual therapy, but like to do the hour long, the 90 minute, that kind of stuff, like, that's a niche thing, and it works really
mhm,
well. So, like, to your point about Parkinson's, like, there's a huge niche in Parkinson's, and so if you do that,
mhm,
there's a lot of people that are gonna come to you. So I think in terms of that, it's like the more women's health is a great example. Like, women's health, I
mm,
know women health specialists, it's such an underserved population, but if me and you were to get into women's health, 1, that's creepy, but 2,
yeah,
also, it's like it's one of those things where it's not our passion. So for us to do
yeah.
lots of women's health stuff, like, I don't know about you, Owen, but I'd be like, "Oh my god, I have another patient that has
I
women's
would,
health." Like,
yeah,
so think about that scenario of like 100 patients, 200 100 patients in a day. If I do 100 women's health patients, I'd be like, "Oh my god, please."
yeah,
Like, that's the worst.
yeah,
So I think the thing about it becomes, and that's not to talk badly on any of these professions or niches, it's just not my thing. And that's fine.
yeah.
So I think it's important to understand the why. And those are some of the
Well,
pitfalls. There's one giant one, but go ahead, Owen. I know you're
I was gonna say, I think it's the hard part for anybody who's searching for business, looking for leads. How do I grow my business? All that is to say, can I afford to say no to the Parkinson's patient, right? If I'm trying to treat baseball players, right?
yeah,
And I think that what's important is to say that Brian doesn't say no, right? He's treating somebody's mother-in-law. She doesn't play for NYCFC,
yeah,
right? But when you are in a networking meeting, when you are posting on social media, when you are doing this, you want to really highlight the perfect patient. So it's important not to say, okay, you got to starve yourself of funds until that one person comes along, especially if you're looking for a very specific type of person. But when you're marketing, you really got to make sure that your brand, right, is associated with that particular patient.
yeah. And I think the bigger key to this when we're talking about this, right, is the biggest pitfall, and it's not even like I'm gonna say this to Owen, and what I wanted to say is like, here's the pitfall. So when you're Owen, let me, if you think about, I'm not gonna put Owen on the spot, but say you're seeing between 10 and 20 patient visits a week right now, and you're solo and
Yeah.
you're doing an hour, right? So say you're in that realm, right? So 20, 30, 40 as you go.
Hmm.
Realize there's a certain point you're gonna run out of time. And
Hmm.
what's gonna happen is when you run out of time, you're gonna look to hire somebody.
Hmm.
What you want, especially this scenario, and I feel like I have hired a lot of PTs away from other people into our practice because they are in my vision. So the thing is,
Hmm.
when you think about this, you don't even realize you're doing it. You're like, I'll just take on a few of these chronic pain patients. I'll take on a few of these patients that that are outside my niche or whatever, and bring them on. But that can start to spiral to a point where now I'm just taking on the people that pay the bills. And the issue
Hmm.
becomes you're not inspired in that vision. And so the issue is it's uninspiring to others as well. And so what happens when you go to hire PTs, our profession is not about like money in that way. I'm a firm believer
Yeah.
in that. If you get to a point where I'm like, hey, I can't pay you $500,000 to treat these patients, that's just not going to happen. So the reality
Yeah.
of why so many physical, physician-owned physical therapy clinics and like hospital clinics will pay out the ass for PTs is because they
Hmm.
know that their populations aren't like something that their therapist can pick. So the reality is
Hmm.
I have hired many PTs away from that and been like, we can help you create the population you want to create. We can work with like return to sport athletes. We can build all these different relationships with people. Like we can help grow it in any direction you want. And people are all about that. People will take
Yeah.
less money for that. People will take more money for that. Like there's all sorts of different directions, and having that ability to grow. Then, if you are doing something that's not inspiring you, it's going to be very difficult to inspire others, and it's going to stifle your long term growth of your business. Like make it super tough to grow. And so that's the thing is. So now we've just painted a picture of this is what I saw when I was reading that DM is like there's a person doing stuff like, well, I'm making money here doing this stuff. And this is what I'm finding is my sweet spot. It's like, all right, did you settle into that? Cause like that's what worked for you. Is that what you want to do? And if you're like, I want to work with that, awesome. That's fantastic. Cause you will be able to inspire other people that you'll be able to work for. Or is it just inspiring to you that you're working by yourself? Because if that's inspiring to you, I promise you, somebody working for you is not going to feel that because that's the only thing that you have going for you that's inspiring you. So just a tale of caution. Hopefully, like I said, with this person, by the way, they should join our school group. This is one of those things that we fix for people and do that. So
Yeah.
again, if you're one of these people listening to this podcast and are like, oh my God, that's me. I'm getting some people and getting some momentum, but it's not the right type of momentum. This is what we can help fix too. I think that's like so freaking important to get out there to people. Like just because you're making money in this or figuring out where you're going to go. If it's not something you're passionate about, you've just ditched your job to go off on your own or build something you have zero interest in building. Like
Yeah.
realize that. Like that is a huge epiphany people need to have when they're in these types of situations. So that
Yeah.
was my
You don't
PSA
want
today.
you don't want to get caught wishing you thought about that before you're already stuck in it. It's harder to get
Yes.
out. And Brian, if you are looking to grow your business, PhysioGrowth mentors physical therapists to achieve greater success and profitability. Visit insert website here and start growing today.
Nice. Nice.
It always trips me up, and I've realized people are listening to us on stuff where there's like show notes and
Yeah.
comments and all that. So whatever, just click the link.
Exactly. School.com/physiogrowth
we
mentorship
we
group.
will eventually have a website that has
We're
that
working
name
on it.
on it. So if only for me to not keep screwing this up.
Exactly. That's all it'll be. It'll just be physiogrowth, whatever.com. And then you'll click on that link to get there. It'll be the same
We
thing.
should just make it like OwenScrewsUpReadingStuff.com. All right.
Exactly.
And with that, Brian, we are out of here, my friend. Have a great Thursday.
Thanks, man. See ya.
I think that's my ending. Should I go with have a great Thursday?
I
No,
like that.
I'll come up with something better. Anyway,
There you
bye.
go.